esteemed guests. And
who's our guest? Who else is on here with us?
I saw Tristan get on. Yep, Tristan Hill.
Other board members are our guests?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I think Juliet's coming too.
Okay. And I would say we can go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Okay. Do we, there's no proxies, I'm assuming. Is that correct? Nobody from Bentonville announced
No,
proxy?
sir. No, sir.
Okay.
Nobody announced any type of proxy.
All right. And if there's no disagreement, I will go ahead and consider this agenda adopted. First item of discussion is the City of Fayetteville requested reduction of ORT salary increases from $3 an hour in 2026 to $2 an hour in 2026 and $2 an hour in 2027. Peter, do you want to go ahead and take the lead on this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I think where this came from really is just, in looking at the magnitude of the cost increase that the city of Fayetteville, and I know the other cities also saw for 2027 in terms of contribution to Ozark Regional Transit in order to maintain basically status quo service. It was a really significant increase for us, and I think we wanted to just have the conversation. Is there a responsible way that we could reduce that increase by a little bit, thereby making the amount we have to contribute for next year a little bit more palatable and easy to absorb. And based on the allocations we've all been able to come up with so far, maybe we could even get a little bit of service increase out of the money that we're all able to contribute. If the salary increase doesn't go up quite as much next year. So I don't exactly, in my rough math, looking at this, the $3 an hour to $2 an hour, or the $3 an hour increase was about half of the overall total cost increase that we saw from Ozark Regional Transit for next year. There was health insurance premiums that went up. There was the conversion over to APRS. It's also driving some increase in some other costs. So, reducing from $3 to $2 potentially puts a little more money back on the table for us to work with. And, I think if we're going to do that, it would make sense to make some kind of a commitment for 2027 in terms of what salary increases would be, because, I fully understand and recognize that Joel's having challenges with recruiting and retention for his folks, particularly when he's competing with Razorback Transit. I was driving around Fayetteville just the other day, and I saw a Razorback Transit bus with the advertisement on the windows hiring between $23 and $27 an hour. I didn't have a chance to circle back with Joel and find out how that compares to his starting salaries, but I know it's that's significantly higher, and so that's definitely a reality that we've got to deal with in terms of increasing the recruitment and retention and decreasing your vacancy rate, and also just doing right by our employees. So just want to put that out there for discussion of the group, and see what other folks thoughts might be on entertaining an increase that's instead of $3 next year, $2.
And if I may, Peter, to answer your question real quick, we're at $17.50 an hour right now as a starting wage. So at the high end, we're $10 an hour less. At the low end, we're $7 an hour less. And just a comment on the $3 an hour, I am really, really advocating that this has to go to $3 an hour. I had some data pulled down on economic competitiveness in Arkansas. The median hourly wage throughout the state is $19.72 an hour. The Northwest Arkansas living wage for one adult is $20.56 an hour. At the $3 an hour, we get to that as a starting point. We don't even come close to it. And we're still a full dollar off if we only went to $2 an hour. I would highly, highly advocate that we stay at the $3 an hour in 2026. And yeah, it's a really cool idea. to do $2 an hour in 26 and another $2 an hour in 27. But I would not want to find us in the same boat in 2020 at the end of 2026 that we are right now, where it's like, we know we talked about it, but we can't do the extra $2 an hour in 2027. So I would advocate that we stay at the $3 an hour for 2026.
Joel, what does about an hour, dollar an hour increase or decrease look like from the city contribution side of things? Like, how would that change?
Um, Articulate that a little bit more. What,
So,
How much,
okay,
how much
so
does each city
we-
have to pay for a $1 per dollar of increase in salary?
Right.
So real quick, let me get over to a spreadsheet that has the annual hours in it. Where is service hours? So Bentonville currently has, or for 2026, the service hours planned are 19,319 hours. Rogers, 19,618 hours. Springdale, 20,135 hours. Fayetteville, 22,444 hours. So take each of your respective hours, multiply it by for each dollar. Mindy, what's the calculator? 1.35 or 1.4? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Her speaker stopped. Okay. Okay, so
closer to 1.4 with
Mindy's saying it's closer to 1.4 per dollar. So that's all benefits and everything else included. So for Springdale, I'm going to do the stupid math right now. 135
times 1.4.
times, let's see, it'd be $3. I'll see. So take the $3, sorry,
$100,000.
times 1.4 equals 4.2 times the 2135. So it's $84,000 increase for the $3.
Okay.
About the same for Rogers.
Yes, sir. Springdale's right there in the middle of everybody, so a little bit higher for Fayetteville, a little bit lower for Rogers and Bentonville.
Well, let me just, rather than haggle over $1 or $2, $3, what the increase is, let me just give you kind of the lay of the land in Rogers. And I suspect it's probably the same in Bentonville and Springdale. I have less of a feel for Fayetteville, but our revenue is essentially flat right now in terms of sales tax revenue. We're looking at around 2% increase next year, as opposed to we've been living with 7 or 8% increases year over year. And so what this means is that ORT is asking for a bigger slice of the pie. So from the big picture perspective, looking at the city budget, where do we reduce other budgets in order to increase transit budgets? And I mean, it ain't going to happen. I don't see it happening. We've got completely unmet needs and street maintenance and stuff like that are super pressing. And so honestly, if this reflects the cost of doing business, then the only solution I can immediately see is a reduction in service,
Okay, so if I may ask, what number are you working off of? Are you working off the $750,000?
I'm working off the number that I gave you, which was basically, I sat down with the finance director and said, okay, well, what if we just increased ORT by 2%, so that it's just keeping up with the increase in revenue?
Right.
And I'm sorry, Joel, I've been trying to get my iPad to log in all morning and I can't do it. So I'm just sitting here on my phone. So I don't have any documents in front of me, but yeah, that's what I did. And that's basically just saying, okay, well, what if we just match? Well, we just keep it at the same level of pain as it's been in the past. And I really I suspect that for at least Benton County and Springdale, that's probably the lay of the land for the foreseeable future. And it kind of takes us, I believe, to the point where we've about hit the ceiling of city support. And we need to be looking at it back to dedicated revenue, which I believe is probably a non-starter for dedicated just for transit. And so pending the creation of a funding stream for transportation improvements for Northwest Arkansas, I don't know if there's a whole lot else we can do. Now, is it possible to, let's say that, we're looking at about $100,000 increase from Rogers. Let's say we just accept the budget reduced below what you want it to be, and then you come back and we're in a crisis and you're asking for an injection of funds. Walton Family Foundation doesn't support us, something like that, and we're in a state of emergency. Could we get an appropriation of funds to keep us swimming? Yeah, I think so. And I do think we should assume Walton Family isn't going to pay anything. I mean, that should always be our starting position.
Right.
Eventually, they're going to stop supporting ORT, I think. So whether it's, $2, it doesn't matter. I mean, my number is a 2% increase over last year.
Okay.
And so what can we do with that?
So what I was able to do before I took off last week, I sent everybody updated 2026 projections, and speaking directly on Rogers, the last number that I received was $750,000, because again, I'm having to get stuff together for the foundation grant.
Yep.
The foundation grant was $447,000, and the federal portionment, we originally took the $579,409 per city, and specifically for Rogers, we added on the $150,684. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Kendall. So what we've been able to do is take, I will say, we are in 2 years arrears, reserves, whichever terminology you want to use on the federal apportionment. And we've taken that from 2 years down to about 1.6 years in reserve by creating this additional federal add-on line. We didn't need to do it in Bentonville, but for Rogers, Springdale, and Fayetteville, we did need to do it so that we could maintain the number of service hours, plus get the additional funding for the employees. The usage of this funding line can be approved by you guys. By all means, changing the federal apportionment from the 579 to the new number per city. This is what I would ask you to do so that we don't have to reduce any hours whatsoever, because we are on a continual climb in ridership in Northwest Arkansas, demonstrating that what we're doing, we are doing well. And then, of course, the Walton Family Foundation, their apportionment of $2,054,000. This is what I would actually propose that you accept and allow us to go ahead and run through with no service hours cut, a nominal increase from each city, and then some additional federal add-on.
Explain additional federal add-on again. You're talking about pulling out of reserves.
So basically, we are currently operating in 2023 federal grant money.
Okay.
Now, that means we still have 2024 and 2025 untapped.
Okay, gotcha.
Now we're using a portion of that. Now, when the government opens 100% for 2026, if that was happening right now, we would have 24, 25, and 26. But as we roll into 26, we'll go into 24 numbers, and then we'll have 24 and a portion of 25 that we'll be using. So in 26, we'll still have federal allocations that have been given to us that are untapped.
Gotcha.
Air quotes, reserve.
Yep. So it's an unsustainable model, but so it's betting on the come. It's betting on future ridership to justify increasing future public funding for transit.
As it always is and always has been. Hoping that the cities, the counties, whatever level, the state level, would go ahead and allocate direct funding to public transit for operational purposes.
Okay.
There's really, from Springdale's side, there's really not pushback from accepting this amount in our budget, but we do wonder, Joel, I know you sent out a multi-year plan, but what are these numbers going to look like next year? What is our goal for next year? Has the Walton Family Foundation indicated anything for next year? Is it just a year by year basis? What happens? Is there some sort of federal add-on next year? There's just so many variables that I think we need to begin discussing much earlier in the year versus right at the end, but there's just so many unknowns. You know, I would like to move to more of a sustainable model, but until we get a dedicated source of funding, I'm afraid this is what it's going to look like.
And I agree with you that this is what it's going to look like year after year without a dedicated source of funds that we can rely upon. That it's not so hopeful that we're going to get, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. This is something that we've done every year at this point in time that I know of, where it is vacillating back and forth on what are we going to be able to afford at a city by city level, and what are we going to be able to give, or what is the ORT going to be able to do for that? I can say right now with the last, I'm going to say 6 weeks, 8 weeks that I can remember, overtime rate of 10 to 12%, because we are burning our employees at all ends, because they're coming, they're getting a CDL, they're leaving. We've lost 3 to Razorback, Bobby, in the last 2 months.
We've lost 2 directly to Razorback that were pay related. Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, I'm not upset with those employees that are going from $17.50 an hour to 23 plus an hour.
So Razorback is getting federal transit money and ORT employees. That's just
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
all right. All right.
There seems to be a clear discrepancy between the two transit authorities. I wonder if, finding more federal funds may be in the cards for next year. I might be saying too much, but
I think the state should cover that cost for the University of Arkansas, but it wouldn't solve the problem though. And I guess that's part of the argument is it a fight worth having, knowing that it doesn't really solve the problem?
right.
But it would
Let's
add
catch up a little bit.
Joel, like another like maybe 1.8 million into the pot.
If you look at that left column where it says total, that's just our portionment of let's see, I'm sorry, not the far left column, the second column in.
The second column, yeah.
Yeah. So in 2026 numbers, it would probably add closer to 2 million from the federal apportionment.
Which is almost the Walton Family Foundation contribution.
Right.
Correct.
We wouldn't be relying as much on private buy-in, but hey.
How about if you want to keep getting federal money, quit scalping employees?
And I mean, the last conversation I had, which was right before football season, with the guys from Razorback, they were at 100%. They had just brought on, Bobby, was it 17 employees before school started?
There was the day that I was told there were 16 people onboarding, and they had 9 in reserve, resumes, applications in reserve.
Okay.
And that was I believe that was Ed that had told me that.
That was the beginning of football season.
Correct.
How many we have in reserve, Bobby?
Well, right now I'm short 13.
Oh my gosh.
So we're minus 13 reserve.
That's correct. I have 42 shifts, Monday through Thursday. I have 43 shifts on Friday. I have 49 drivers on staff. I have 2 on LOA. I have one more with notice pending. He's moving to be with family. So I'm basically flat with the same number of shifts as I have drivers. That's without vacation or illness or anything. So we have drivers running doubles every day. Yeah, it's a little tough.
Mm.
And that doesn't include the maintenance where I believe Brian has 7 positions and only has 3 of them filled for technicians. And then we still have, we've got 2 out of 3 road supervisors and 3 out of 5 dispatchers.
I'm at 79% staff for operators only, and I am 66% staff for operations admin. Admin positions are typically filled from within because you can't come from outside an organization and run admin. So overall, I'm at 75% in operations.
Well, I want to recognize that I recognize that you're holding this together with baling wire right now, and that's an impressive job. So I appreciate it as a board member that you're able to
Thank you.
keep the wheels running. I know it's not easy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to recognize that also. I mean, I run the solid waste utility for the city of Fayetteville. We went through you know, an issue with the number of vacancies and high turnover a couple of years ago out of COVID, and I can definitely appreciate firsthand how stressful and difficult that can be. But on the same note, you know, what I want the board members to recognize is that this proposal that Joel has in front of us is basically committing us to deficit spending. And I think we just need to be cautious going into deficit spending because the numbers are only going to get bigger going forward. And you know, we will burn through this federal funding, you know, reserve, if that's what we're going to call it, in short order if we don't have a dedicated funding solution. And I 100% agree that we don't want to cut service, particularly now when we're seeing ridership growth. But if we come to the end of our federal funding reserves and don't have a dedicated solution in place, then that will be the harsh reality that the region is gonna have to feel. And so in my mind, it makes sense to buy as much time as possible and use these reserves as judiciously as possible and cautiously as possible so that we can stretch them as long as possible, because we don't know what that timeline looks like for dedicated funding. We don't know what next year looks like for Walton Family Foundation funding. We don't even know that we're going to get Walton Family Foundation funding this year. I mean, the grant's not approved until the grant is approved, right?
Correct.
So
and
that's just where I want to exercise or articulate my desire to exercise caution with the amount we're exposing ourselves in terms of taking on additional operating costs.
And with the not guaranteed until it's written in paper Walton Family Foundation grant, the one thing that I do want to articulate is that any changes to our funding request, any changes to our hours of service, any changes to anything that we're going to do, I know for sure that we will have to revisit the grant to ensure that their apportionment is in line with what we say we're going to do. So if we're going to reduce funding on one side or the other, whether it's the federal funding, the city funding, I know the foundation wants to know so that they can make their adjustments necessary. Yeah, I have filled both grants out because they're doing them by county. They want a Benton County grant and a Washington County grant. This is the second year in a row that they've done it this way. I've filled them out, answered all the questions, don't know where it stands. Last series of questions I answered were Friday and Monday.
Okay.
But the grants have been submitted.
I agree with Peter's call for caution here, and I'd feel a little bit differently if we had a plan, if we were on an on-ramp towards at least going to the voters for funding or something. If there were a plan, there's a desire for sure, and we're talking a lot about this at regional planning, and everywhere. I guess the other thing is we're not talking about a huge amount of dipping into next year.
And I can just attest from a recruitment standpoint, for me to walk out there and say, I'm willing to pay you $19.50 an hour versus $20.50 an hour for a CDL. There's a psychological
Yeah.
break in there on the
Getting over
teens
20.
versus over 20.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
I would say 20.
listen. That's why I started out with. I think I think I would prefer a reduction in service because I'm such a firm believer in a living wage. I just, from a moral perspective, I don't feel good at all about paying somebody less than a living wage, regardless of whether it's a competitive wage. It needs to at least be a living wage. So I would rather pay a living wage and reduce service and then go to my elected officials and say, look, y'all, I mean, this is just the reality of it. We need to figure out how to make this work or accept the fact that we're losing our transit system slowly over time.
Mm-hmm. And I can say this. I mean, we are not doing anything to say, hey, we need to catch up to Razorback Transit. All we want to do is be able to say we're another option to Razorback Transit because we're kind of close. And I can say this hands down from people that I talk to over at the university versus here, they like the working environment here a whole hell of a lot more. And for some people, that's enough to make a difference if we were paying equally.
Yeah.
Or not even equally, close to equally. My last mechanic I lost for $4. I couldn't, he's, for what he was making, he's been here for 3 years and he was getting $4 an hour more over at JD Buyrite or something like that, JB Buyrite, for $4.
Yeah.
You ever hear the employees still talk about the benefits?
Employees like the benefits. They think it's very, very good.
Drivers, mechanics, admin, all alike?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That was a solid choice last year, and thank you for allowing us to go ahead and make that move. Again, I would like for us to carry on in this staff proposal listed below. I don't know what I got to do to argue beyond what I've already said for this to go through this here. But this is really going to be key in us having safe and sane operators.
If this does go through, Joel, when do you think is a good time to start talking about the 27 cycle for budgeting? Because it's got to be much sooner than this year.
January 1st of 26.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, in our first board meeting, and it's actually our first board meeting is going to be in February in 20 of each year. But our first executive committee meeting is January, and that would be the time to start talking about what are we going to do and how are we going to grow.
how many of the other cities are looking at instituting a tax for this to fund ORT in their cities?
Nobody.
That's a problem.
I mean, it wouldn't work. So in my opinion, it wouldn't work at the city level or probably even at the county level. Maybe you could get approval at Washington County. There's zero chance of getting approval in Benton County for a transit tax. And so I think most of the conversations about a tax, at least in regional planning, which I think would be the lead on something like this, have been for the establishment of a regional transportation tax that would serve the entire MPO.
Mhm.
And roughly speaking, 70% of it would go to roads, 20% would go to transit, and 10% would go to non-vehicular transportation like trails and things like that. But that tax would, on the roadside, would cover, well, all of it would cover regional transportation concerns that are neither city nor state initiatives. And so, the ORT model has been that there's initially this allocation of federal money, which is always contentious. And then the city pays whatever the city wants to add on to that in order to establish service within the city. I think that our move is towards regionalization of that and the establishment of a series of intercity fixed routes,
Mhm.
initially within Benton County and Washington County, then connecting through like
Yep.
Lowell to Springdale. And to really get to that next step, you've got to kind of think of it regionally, and there's got to be a regional flow of money. And then you get into, well, where do you get the money? It's most likely, I think, a property tax. And in order to raise that, you've got to have the Arkansas State Legislature empower the Regional Planning Commission or the creation of this, more of a serious council of governments to go directly to the voters and bypass the quorum courts in the city councils. And then it's got to pass,
Right.
And so, and why property tax? Because sales tax is already basically at 10%, which
Yeah.
I think everybody, that's kind of like $20 an hour. That's just kind of a number you can't really cross. And so Tim, that's just kind of my understanding. To recap the conversation over the last 4 or 5 years, that's kind of the direction that I know Tim Conklin, he was just, that's why I wasn't talking to y'all for a minute. He was over here, but he's been beating that drum, and I think the rest of us have too, that we've got to do something like that. But no city is, I mean, I guess you could by ordinance just determine that X% of our revenue will always go to transit. But even if you did that, it doesn't mesh with the ORT financial model.
Right.
It's never going to mesh up to what the need is. Then you get into the contentious part about the allocation of the federal money. And there's two views of this. Peter Nierengarten's view, which is absolutely valid, is that Fayetteville should get an allocation of the federal money commensurate with ridership in Fayetteville, because ultimately that money ought to go to support ridership. My view, which I think is also valid, is that money should go to the region to establish regional routes, and anything in addition to regional routes should be up to the city to pay. I don't think any of it should go to the University of Arkansas, because in my opinion, that's not really public transportation. That's university transportation. And so far we haven't found another university system that takes federal transit money. Now it's a little weird in Fayetteville, because Fayetteville, they supplement the Razorback transit budget so that citizens of Fayetteville can ride without having to pay a student fee. So anyway. And we've even talked about merging ORT and Razorback Transit into a single transit authority. And, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But the problem with that is, people don't like working there. Where would Joel Gardner be? Well, he'd probably be happier out in the woods shooting feral pigs anyway. So,
Yep.
but all that said, Joel, I guess you've got my number. And assuming the federal allocation doesn't change, you know what the total available for transit and Rogers is. And if
Yep.
Walton Family falls through, then we're going to have to reduce our service, or I can go back to city council and ask for an allocation out of reserves. But our mayor, who's in his last term, is spending reserve money like a drunken sailor, and there really isn't very much left, which is what I'd be doing too.
Yeah.
Took him 13 years to build it up. He doesn't want to pass it on to the next guy.
Nice. Well, with your blessing, I would like to take with the executive committee's blessing, I would like to take the staff proposal to the entire board to be voted on next week.
And what's the risk of that? This is based on your $3 an hour increase.
Yes.
The risk is that you don't know whether the cities can support what you have as their contribution on the spreadsheet, and you don't know if the Walton Family Foundation is going to give you the money you've asked for.
The risk right now is, are the cities solid in those numbers? And when will I get notification from the Walton Family Foundation that they support the number that they indicated that they were going to provide?
Well, we're going to vote on our budget first Tuesday in December, and until then, you're not going to know. And that's probably about the same time you're going to find out about the Walton Family Foundation. And so if everything goes to hell at that point, I guess we reconvene an emergency meeting and figure out what to do.
And well, we've got a regular December board meeting. Next week is the financial or the budget meeting for the year, for the upcoming year. And I mean, I instead of laying in wait, giving me a path to travel, is what I'm looking for at this point in time.
And this is Clay. Rogers we're having our budget meeting on Monday, the entire council. I think we'll know whether this number is going to be acceptable to council and move. It'd be really unlikely for it to go smoothly through that meeting and not get voted through. Just FYI.
Yeah,
that's fair enough. And I think the Walton money is similar, where once they have you're gonna get word before there's an official notification. We always do. So and that's the same situation Rogers would be in, and I think the other cities. You'll know before we officially can tell you.
Right.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about Fayetteville's number. We had our first budget hearing last Thursday, and I didn't hear any concern from any of the council members on our number. We got another session with them next Tuesday, and we'll learn a little bit more.
And for Springdale, ours is in the budget that the mayor has put together. Again, it's not been voted on by council, and we're kind of in the same boat as Rogers on that.
Same with Bentonville. You have our number and has been finally voted.
Yeah, the one comment on Bentonville is, Joel, there was a lot of discussion about trying to maintain the paratransit into the areas where on demand is now, and they're just looking at some options. But I think I didn't hear any discussion about changing the dollar amount, as Tim said, but has been some discussion. And I've told him you're out, and I would get back with you when you got back to start teeing up those discussions. So
yeah, just real quick on the side note, Dan, I'm having Lakeisha attempt to schedule one-on-ones with the city council members, because there seems to be a disconnect on what each level of service does. What does fixed route do? What does ADA paratransit do? What does demand response do? And what does on-demand transit do? So that way I can provide more education to them.
They're probably going to expect you to be at the next committee of the whole, which may be before you can get together with them. So
okay, that's fine. More education is better at all times.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to make you aware of that.
Thank you, sir.
You need a motion?
It's
No.
No, we're not really a voting body. It just, we're forwarding with recommendation, I guess, for
Yeah.
approval at the next, board meeting next week,
Okay, you just need a head nod. So I'm
pretty much.
count my head as one that's nodding right now.
Okay.
Okay. Same for us.
Same.
I think we're still on the fence on the $3 number, but I'll talk to my folks a little bit more about it.
Okay. The other item that I wanted to bring up was utilization of uncommitted 5307 allocation to bridge the local funding gaps, or a discussion of equal allocation outside of the operational of the Walton Family Foundation grants plus federal grants. Looking at the federal apportionment right now. Peter, you wanted to talk a little bit differently about the federal apportionment, which is
Yeah.
page 2.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Joel. I mean, what I came up with on page 2 was before you had put together the table, the ORT staff proposal that you were shown previously. And, this was kind of my attempt at trying to, because we had discussed in previous budget cycles, trying to take the Walton Family Foundation contribution to ORT and the federal contribution to ORT and add those together and divide those up evenly between the cities, and had come pretty close to accomplishing that last year. And then this year, the federal funding proposal, originally that came out from ORT was equal for all the cities. And of course, the Walton Family Foundation numbers were unequal for all the cities. So it left Fayetteville kind of, in the worst position in terms of deficit. And so what I had come up with was a proposal down there in table 2, which I'm having a little trouble seeing because it's so, here we go. In option 2 was taking the foundation, all the foundation money, all the federal money, add them together and divide them by 4 and basically giving that contribution to each of the cities. And what that would do is increase Fayetteville's federal contribution, decrease Springdale's, increase Rogers, and decrease Bentonville's. So creates, some I think additional difficulty in terms of keeping service levels the same for all the cities. And like I said, Joel then came back with his proposal that's up above that uses the federal funding reserves, which is actually my preferred solution. And but just want to make the executive committee aware that there's potentially other options, i.e. the solution that I drew up if we do not want to dip into reserves this coming year, which again, to be clear, is not my current position, but just thought it was a conversation worth having with the executive committee.
And if I can add on to that, Peter, I attempted to do that out the gate with my conversations with the foundation. And I showed equal federal apportionment, equal foundation apportionment. After an hour or so of conversation, and I'll paraphrase, it was the foundation has never done anything equally like this. The foundation has provided their funding based off of what they deem is a need. So I attempted to get out right onto there. I handed them options, and it was all 25, 25, 25. Everything was split equally between the 4 cities. And then they came back with their allocation, which is on the previous page, of anywhere from 405 to 618, based off of their mathematical calculation. So I attempted to do this from the get-go.
Hey, one more time for the slow guy. Joel, how did you allocate the federal on your version? And we're talking about option 2, correct?
What I originally did was I took the allocation, split it by 4.
Okay.
Now
that's option 1.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the foundation came through with their number, and the difference the new allocation with the new add-on is the difference between what the cities can say they can do, what the foundation says they can do, and then their total cost.
Gotcha. I'm just asking for federal allocation on option 2. What's the math behind that? Are you backing that?
Peter, what did you use for the math on that?
Yeah, the federal allocation is essentially it's the total outside funding divided by 4 minus the Walton Family Foundation for each of the cities, and what's left is the federal allocation for each of the cities. Is that
okay? I see what.
Yeah, so you're just
Makes sense.
you're getting the total to balance out equally and backing into that number by reallocating the federal funding.
So you're kind of you're doing a back end approach to to balancing the Walton Family Foundation allocation back to equal.
Yep.
Effectively.
Exactly.
Okay.
Effectively. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are they going to have an issue with that? I mean, or will they even see that? I think they are. Yeah.
It took me that long to figure that out, so they'll probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I answer questions for this, they want to know how much went to this city, how much went to that city. Was it for operations? Was it for maintenance? Was it for fuel? I mean, they want to know where everything went per city.
I think one of the challenges we have the Walton Family Foundation, and you just said it, they don't just balance, they don't just give everybody the same amount of money. They pay for needs, unmet needs. And but even on ORT, that's not really what they're doing here. They're making up the gap between for operational expenses. What they would rather do is pay for the first 3 years of bus rapid transit or something like that. And then we would come in and over time pick up the operational costs of sustaining that. So we're already outside of their financial model.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think we should always assume it's going to go away unless we're asking them to help with some kind of a systemic enhancement of the overall program. And so as far as federal allocation, it's I resist any effort to change the allocation around the federal formula, just because that's not how it would work if we were a single entity. If we were a metropolitan area around Kansas City, we wouldn't look at it that way. We'd be managing a regional transit system. And we would put that federal money just that'd be the first thing into the bucket. And then, it just washes through the system. And then, you would have some sort of other formula for the other taxation entities or other sources of money that are coming into the system. And so, I take the federal money and just put it to the bottom line at ORT and then take that off the table. And then what does it cost to cover the rest of the stuff? And you could charge that on a per capita basis. There are a lot of different ways you could allocate it. Right now, you allocate it as 4 really independent transit systems. Yep. And I know Bentonville and Rogers are working pretty hard to combine. I think Fayetteville and Springdale are still thinking about combining some fixed routes. And I hope that we're moving, again, I'm beating this dead horse, but I hope that we're moving towards a regional fixed route system. Yep. And then if Rogers decides that we want to run a shopping circular around Uptown Rogers, then that's on us. But I wouldn't consider that to be part of this regional network. And the other thing that, just philosophically, I have a little bit of a problem with allocating based on ridership, just because Fayetteville's in such a unique situation in that the University of Arkansas is the backbone of the Fayetteville system. And if we had the University of Arkansas and Rogers, we'd have more riders too, I mean, so I think that this is regional apart from Razorback Transit is what we're trying to manage.
This is Dan. I know I'm not on the executive committee, but I'm sure Tim has the same question. Chuckling at that. So the reserve money that you're pulling in, is that included in the allocation calculation? Or was that not included?
Kendall, go up one page. Right there. Where it says federal add-on, Dan, That's where the reserve money's going to.
And I mean, obviously, I'm noticing that Bentonville says 0, but that's because we chipped in a little more than we had planned on trying to
Yeah.
make this work. And if the other cities didn't, and they're getting the benefit of the add-on, and that's not included in the math equation
Yep.
for any reallocation, I think there's a gap there.
Absolutely. And that's, Rogers was facing the same kind of situation with our initial ask, which didn't make it through the first round of budget talks. And so we were taken back down to 2% growth over last year. And now suddenly now we need all this money. Well, if Bentonville basically did what we are proposing to do, you would have to have more federal assistance also. And it's not fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So,
Well, I guess
so
what I'm saying is if we're going to do a federal reallocation, those amounts coming out of the federal add-on feel like ought to be included in that math somehow. If we end
Yeah.
up there, which we may not. But again, I'm not on the executive committee, so I'll nod and
Right.
step back
And-
slowly.
And Dan, this is great. This is a great open conversation. I mean, one of the things to also look at yes, there's a big goose egg there for Bentonville, but there's not a big goose egg there for the Walton Family Foundation support. We started out equally with everybody. Then we take a look at if you look at the total cost of running the operation, Bentonville's right now is the lowest because you got the least amount of hours, but you got the greatest amount of Walton Family Foundation support. If Bentonville got less of that support, that money would be in there for the federal add-on. So if foundation even went in as Springdale's number, you'd still have $40,000 in there as support.
And
And
I understand. Thank you for letting me talk, but
Yeah.
I understand how that's working. I just think that may change the perception of fairness amongst the city council members. I guess that's my comment to that.
Okay.
Did we discuss everything we needed to? Was there anything anybody
we
else
did.
wants to bring up?
Hey, since I love the sound of my own voice so much, to that point with Bentonville, I'm beating this fucking dead horse, but if we took all of the federal allocation and allocated on a per capita basis, and then each city had to supplement that to cover whatever service they want, then you don't get into these discrepancies. And if Bentonville has a relationship with Walton Family Foundation, they can get more money than I can, then good for them, But I could go to my city council and say, hey, this is fair. Everything is based on a per capita allocation of federal money, and it's up to the city of Rogers to determine how much transit they want. Everybody's in the same boat. I share the discomfort, though, of the way this always works out, which is you see how much money you can get, and if your city is being generous and pays a lot, you get a lot less supplemental assistance than somebody who isn't able to do that.
Yep. So may I take the staff proposal to the budget meeting next week?
Yes.
Yeah, you got my support for that.
Very
Yes.
No, I guess.
good. Thank you very much, sir.
It's shitty. I wish we could have a little bit better quality work out of you, but
Yeah. I appreciate it. I really do. Anybody got anything else that they want me to address? All right. With that, I'm going back out to the woods.
good luck.
All right. Thank you
y'all.
very much.
Thanks.
See you, Joe.